At American Military University, we're inspired by our students. More than scholars, they're everyday heroes who selflessly protect and improve their communities. As a nationally recognized leader in online learning, we're honored to educate those who serve with premier degrees for national security and public service professionals. Learn how American Military University is setting the standard for affordable, quality online education. Visit us at amuonline.com/yourfuture.
American history and culture was born in the villages and small towns that became the new homes for the immigrants that came to this area. This is the story of their hopes and their dreams that still live on today in the people of these historic communities. Welcome to Road Trip to History. Potomac, a Native American name meaning great trading place. The Potomac River is so rich in American history, it has earned the nickname the nation's river. Shenandoah is of unknown Native American origin. The most popular romanticized belief is that the name is a Native American expression for beautiful daughter of the stars. The two rivers unite, dividing Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia at a place we now call Harper's Ferry. Native American history in Harper's Ferry goes back at least 8,000 years. The Tuscarora people inhabited the area in large numbers but vanished in the early 18th century due to disease and conflict with the European settlers. In 1732, the first settler in Harper's Ferry was a man named Peter Stevens. Stevens sold his squatter's rights in 1747 to a traveler named Robert Harper. In 1751, Harper bought a patent on 125 acres on what is now the present location of Harper's Ferry. Harper continued to operate a ferry across the Potomac River, making the settlement a starting point for travelers moving into the Shenandoah Valley and beyond. The Virginia General Assembly established the town of Shenandoah Falls at Mr. Harper's Ferry in 1763.
While visiting Harper's Ferry, I stood on a large rock which provided a view of the Potomac through the Blue Ridge, perhaps one of the most stupendous scenes in nature. Thomas Jefferson, October 25, 1783.
In 1775, Robert Harper chose this location for his house. The location has a most spectacular view. However, Robert and his wife both died before the building was completed. The Harper House was used as a tavern for 20 years. And in 1803, both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson stayed here at the Harper House. At Harper's death in 1782, the community included a cabin, 3 houses, and a collection of other buildings. Harper had established a grist and sawmill a short distance up the Shenandoah River at a location that came to be known as Virginia's Island. At the age of 53, George Washington, as president of the Potomac Company, a company formed to make travel improvements on the Potomac River, came to Harper's Ferry to determine the need for bypass canals. Because of his knowledge of the area, in 1794, Washington selected Harper's Ferry the site for the new United States Armory and Arsenal. In 1796, the federal government purchased land in Harper's Ferry, and 3 years later, construction began on the U.S. Armory and Arsenal. 2 members of General Washington's family moved to the area, including his brother Charles, who founded the city of Charlestown, some 6 miles to the southwest. In 1806 and 07, the Potomac Company constructed several locks and canals, including a 580-yard canal just above Virginia's Island. John Peacher, a boatman working along the Potomac River, purchased the island from Daniel McPherson in 1817. Peacher moved his boating operation to the island and began transporting flour to Georgetown and Alexandria. On January the 8th, 1827, the General Assembly passed an act incorporating the town of Virginius. The island would be laid off into lots with streets and alleys. Soon, additional mills, warehouses, and residents lined the new streets of Virginia's Island. The population of Harper's Ferry rose to about 1,400 in 1820. That year, the establishment of the rifle works at the old Harper sawmill site substantially enlarged the armory. The Whitehall Tavern served as a drinking house for the armory workers. Located directly across the street from the armory, the tavern served as a good place for politics and trash talking. It was at Harper's Ferry in April of 1803 that the Lewis and Clark expedition was outfitted with weapons from the armory for their western journey. Lewis had designed a collapsible boat that the mechanics at the armory were able to produce. The church was an important part of most early settlements, and Harper's Ferry was no different. People living in and around Harper's Ferry, along with workers from the armory, often met in halls and private homes for Sunday services. The first church constructed in Harper's Ferry was the Free Church, built in 1825, but was destroyed by fire 20 years later. Construction of the Chesapeake and Ohio and the Baltimore and Ohio railroads produced an influx of Irish laborers to Harper's Ferry in the early 1830s.
My husband Frederick and I came to America, like so many others, looking for a new beginning. We settled in Harper's Ferry, where Frederick started a confectionery. Soon the enticing smell of bread, cakes, candies, pies filled the air in Harper's Ferry. Anne-Marie Holder, Harper's Ferry, 1848.
In 1861, Anne Roeder fell ill and passed away. That same year, Frederick was struck by a stray bullet and became the first civilian casualty of the Civil War in Harper's Ferry. Their 6 children abandoned their home, and the house became the headquarters for the Union Army. The building of the St. Peter's Catholic Church was started in 1830 and completed 3 years later. St. Peter's Catholic Church symbolized the traditions, customs, habits, and religion of the early Irish immigrants. The ruins of the St. John's Episcopal Church are all that remain today in Harpers Ferry. Built in 1852 on the grounds of the Free Church, St. John's was later abandoned for a new Episcopal church located in the upper town of Harpers Ferry. Visitors today report ghostly images on some of the photos taken at this site. A congregation of Lutherans existed in Harpers Ferry as early as 1828. They worshiped in the old Free Church until it burned. In 1850, the St. John's Lutheran Church was built as a single-story brick structure with the upstairs balcony visible through the window. In the early hours of October the 17th, 1859, life in Harpers Ferry would change forever. The name Harpers Ferry would soon be known to most all Americans. Local physician John D. Starry ordered the church bell at St. John's Lutheran Church to be rung to alert Harpers Ferry that John Brown's raid was underway. Many terrified residents gathered at the Lutheran church.
I never witnessed such a fright in any community as when the news fled that the abolitionists of the North had taken the armory and were killing our people. Reverend Dr. Joseph P. Smeltzer, St. John's Lutheran Church.
Brown and his men captured prominent citizens and seized the federal armory and arsenal. John Brown had hopes that the local slave population would join the raid, and through the raid's success, weapons would be supplied to slaves and freedom fighters throughout the country. This was not to be. Brown was met by the local militia that was able to hold him off and forced him and his men to take refuge in the arsenal's engine house. U.S. Marines commanded by Lieutenant Green and Colonel Robert E. Lee were sent to Harpers Ferry. On the morning of October 18th, the Marines stormed the engine house, ending Brown's raid.
I am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood. John Brown, 1859.
Many of the raiders were killed, and Brown, badly injured, was captured. John Brown was taken to Charlestown, where he was placed on trial and found guilty of treason, murder, and slave insurrection. He was sentenced to death by hanging. Many historians believe that the John Brown raid in Harpers Ferry in 1859 was the true start of the Civil War, and for the residents of Harpers Ferry it was. Because of the armory and geographic location of Harpers Ferry on the two rivers and at the mouth of the Shenandoah Valley, this small town was a major target for both the Union and the Confederates throughout the Civil War. In April of 1861, Virginia seceded from the Union. The U.S. garrison attempted to burn the arsenal at Harpers Ferry and destroy the machinery to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Confederates. In September of 1862, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, on its way to Maryland, under the command of now General Robert E. Lee, advanced on Harpers Ferry. Lee decided to send General Stonewall Jackson with 3 columns into Harpers Ferry to capture the arsenal and the Union garrison under the command of Colonel Dixon Miles. The terrain at Harpers Ferry made it almost impossible to defend. Jackson placed artillery on the heights looking down on the small village. On the morning of September the 15th, Jackson attacked, firing down from 3 sides and following with an infantry assault. Miles believed that the situation was hopeless and decided to surrender. As his surrender was being debated, Miles was struck by a shell that shattered his leg. The wound would prove to be fatal. Stonewall Jackson took possession of Harpers Ferry before joining the rest of Lee's army at a place called Sharpsburg. General A.P. Hill was left to manage the garrison and parole of some 12,700 Union prisoners, the most ever surrendered by the United States military.
And so 2 days and nights pass without a hope of the end being near. Houses are destroyed in the various parts of the town. In one, the shell first kills an infant in its mother's arms, then wounds the mother, so she does not recover for years after. A Negro woman venturing forth for water is killed and lies in the street all day. The great objects in life were to procure something to eat and to keep yourself out of sight by day and to keep your candlelight hidden by night. Lights of every kind, being regarded as signals to the rebels, were usually greeted by a volley of guns. Annie Marmion, September 1862.
I stayed on the 2nd floor of Mrs. Stipe's boarding house while I was following General Philip Sheridan's army during his Shenandoah Valley campaign. Even though the war had badly scarred the area, the two rivers uniting at this place was a sight to remember. James E. Taylor, Civil War sketch artist, Harpers Ferry, 1864.
Harpers Ferry was badly damaged during the Civil War. The railroads, the arsenal, many private homes, and churches, including St. Peter's Catholic Church. The Lutheran Church that sounded the alarm during the John Brown raid and served as a hospital to both Union and Confederates took a direct hit but survived. Jobs were lost and many gone forever. But out of the dust and the ruins arose a new hope for the future. In 1867, the Camp Hill Wesley United Methodist Church was built with bricks from the destroyed Armory building. The church stands majestically along the hillside and continues to be a spiritual beacon to all. For over 88 years, the place of education known as Storr College stood high above Harper's Ferry on Camp Hill. Beginning life as a one-room school for free men, Storr grew into a full-fledged degree-granting college open to all races, creeds, and colors for men and women. Former slaves thrown into the world with no training, no skills, and no education found at Storr a place to learn to read and write, and to teach others in their community, and to develop marketable skills.
I was living in a part of West Virginia where no high schools were provided for black children. The love and advice given by the faculty at Storr played a major part in shaping my life. Molly Harvey, 1928.
Curtis Free Will Baptist Church served both as a religious building for students at Storr College and as a church for the African American residents. Constructed in 1894, the brick church was named for Cyrus Curtis, whose family donated money in his memory to build the church. The Niagara Movement was a black civil rights organization that held their first meeting at Niagara Falls in Canada. The movement held their first open and public meeting on American soil in August of 1906 at the campus of Storr College. The Niagara Movement became the cornerstone of modern civil rights and was the forerunner to the NAACP. Any community that lives along a river is going to be subject to floods, and Harpers Ferry and the Virginius Islands are located on not one, but two major rivers. The first recorded flood was in 1748 and drove Robert Harper from his log cabin he had acquired from Peter Stevens. The pumpkin flood of 1753 washed pumpkins from the fields of nearby Indian settlements into the streets of Harpers Ferry. Many floods followed up to 1936, when the water crested at 33.5 feet and swept away forever parts of Harpers Ferry and all of the remaining Virginius Island. The Appalachian Trail is a 2,185-mile-long public footpath that travels from Maine to Georgia. Just about halfway, the trail comes down past Jefferson Rock and on through Lower Harpers Ferry, on its way across the Potomac, and on down the C&O Canal. History most definitely evolves. Camp Hill, originally the home site for the elite that worked at the armory, became the encampment and headquarters for both armies during the Civil War. Camp Hill then became the home of Storr College, and today the National Park Service calls Camp Hill their home. Harpers Ferry was originally designated as a national monument in 1944. Today, it is the Harpers Ferry National Historic Park. The park includes all of Lower Historic Harpers Ferry and parts of both Maryland and Virginia. Visitors to Harpers Ferry today find the village looks very much as it did 150 years ago. Historic buildings and streets are carefully restored and maintained by the Park Service. In addition to museums and ongoing events, the streets are lined with interesting shops and restaurants. One could easily make the argument that Harpers Ferry is one of the most historic and beautiful towns in West Virginia and America. This is Harpers Ferry. If you would like a DVD copy of this program, visit us at roadtriptohistory.com.